from the sturgeon to the elephant shrew. Here are some very old animal species that still exist. Let's start. If you like caviar like many people, you certainly want to know more about the sturgeon, the fish that gives these famous little black balls very appreciated by gourmet, don't you? Well, this bony fish is one of the oldest fish species since it has existed for tens of millions of years. A prehistoric fish? You are suddenly astonished. This information, which seems doubtful to you, pushes you to make some research on this fish, which only confirms what you have just heard. You also learn that this old fish was highly prized for its flesh and that its swim bladder produces a good natural glue. This is interesting. However, because of the information you have just received, you are somewhat put off by the idea of eating caviar because you suddenly feel like you are eating prehistoric eggs. But of course, this is only an impression, and you soon regain your appetite and desire for good caviar. However, you know that the next time you eat it, you will not be able to stop yourself from thinking about everything you have just learned about sturgeon. This is the nautilus, a cephalopod mollusk that lives in the Pacific Ocean, Indian Ocean, and China Sea, and has been around for 400 million years. The small animal of which we usually find many fossils would have appeared well before the dinosaurs. Like all the other animal species that lived at the time, the nautilus intended to preserve its lineage and live for many years to come. But as we all know, our planet has experienced catastrophes that have led to the extinction of many species, including the dinosaurs. This was not the case for the nautilus, which resisted all these threatening phenomena and has managed to survive until today. On the other hand, its presence among humans has confronted it with many problems. Well, because of its great beauty, the nautilus was highly prized by collectors and artists who used its shell to make art objects or other luxurious pieces. But today, the small animal, which comes in 6 species, can count on the support and protection of those who fight for the preservation of animal species and the environment. This could perpetuate the existence of this wonderful creature. Scientists who specialize in the study of the animal kingdom are always looking at the ancestors of each species in order to trace its origins. But as far as the sandhill crane is concerned, these scientists have discovered something much more surprising than they thought. Indeed, this magnificent bird would be a direct descendant of the dinosaurs if we refer to a 10-million-year-old fossil that was found in the state of Nebraska in the United States. Thinking that this fossil belonged rather to a prehistoric cousin of the bird, scientists pushed their research a little further until they found a 2.5-million-year-old skull. This time, there was no doubt. The skull most likely belonged to a sandhill crane. One can imagine the patience these good scientists had to have before finding the skull, studying it, and coming to this conclusion. But at least there was no doubt in their minds. This discovery may have even made them want to study the origins of other birds. Imagine that you are in New Zealand, a country that has always fascinated you for its flora and fauna. You want to go to one of the many zoos in this country to see its different endemic species up close. That's it, you're there. But while you are strolling in the reptile area, an animal looking like a big lizard suddenly attracts your attention. You then approach a sign to inform yourself about this animal species that you have never seen before, and whose name seems difficult to pronounce at first. SPHENODON. Well, yes, it is a sphenodon. As you read on, you discover that this animal is also called a tuatara or heteria, that it has a third eye in its head, that it has dermal bone plates, and that it is a living fossil. What does this mean? Well, the shape of this animal is reminiscent of species that are known only as fossils. A very old animal then. In fact, at the bottom of the sign, you discover that the sphenodon has existed for more than 220 million years. Whoa! The ancestors of this animal, which is about 60 centimeters long, cohabited with the gigantic dinosaurs. You suddenly feel your hair stand on end at the thought that this reptile lived during the time of the dinosaurs, and that it can be a ferocious animal. But fortunately, your fear disappears immediately because this nice Sphenodon doesn't really look like one. In fact, the more you look at him, the more you feel amazed by his prehistoric appearance and charm. Are you preparing a presentation on amphibians and more specifically on the salamander? Interesting. But while you want to do some research on this animal, you discover, to your great astonishment, that there is a species of giant salamander that lives only in China and can measure up to 1 meter 80 centimeters. Curious by what you have just discovered, you decide to push your research further, and there you are not disappointed. Indeed, you learn that the giant salamander of China is a species that resists the most extreme temperatures, that it would be behind the myth of the dragons, and cherry on the cake, that it exists on our planet since 170 million years. All this information has allowed you to acquire new knowledge about this very old animal species. However, you were very sad to learn that the Chinese giant salamander is critically endangered. That said, it might well disappear one day. But you tell yourself that nothing could make this animal species, which has existed for 170 million years, disappear and still live happily on Earth. So you are reassured and even motivated more than ever to go to China to see this beautiful salamander. Not long ago, you were watching a documentary about the oldest species of birds on Earth. You were hoping to learn more about some of them, but you were more attracted by a bird you had never seen before and whose name immediately caught your eye. The Nile shrew-bill. Impressed by this large bird that lives mainly in Africa and owes its name to the shape of its huff-like beak, you decided to do more research on this animal at the end of the documentary. You discovered that this carnivorous bird has indeed been around for a very long time, that it can live up to 35 years in the wild and even longer in captivity, and that it uses its powerful beak to fish. This information allowed you to know a little more about this animal. However, you were a little saddened to learn that there are only a few thousand of these birds left in the world due to several factors, including the destruction of their habitat. But you quickly found a smile on your face when you discovered that this vulnerable species is protected by law in some countries, and that naturalists are doing everything possible to take care of it. You are now reassured. But more importantly, your interest in the Nile shrew-bill has only increased, right? For as long as you can remember, you have believed that dinosaurs are the oldest animal species living in our planet. But one day, when you wanted to know which of these gigantic animals was the first to appear on Earth, you were greatly surprised to discover that there was another animal species much older than the dinosaurs and that still exists today. This species is none other than the horseshoe crab, which is also a type of crab. Well, that's curious. Without further ado, you rush to your computer to do some research on this prehistoric crab, whose shape did not leave you indifferent. You then learned that horseshoe crabs have indeed existed for more than 300 million years. On the other hand, the research carried out on this animal with 10 legs and 10 eyes allowed you to know that it lives along the coasts of Mexico and the United States, but also the Asian coasts, and that it prefers to reproduce at night, the evenings of full moon, and when the tide is high. As for this enormous mass that reminds the horseshoe in you, well, it is the head of the horseshoe crab that contains most of the nervous and biological organs, as the brain, the heart, the nervous system, the glands, and the mouth. Wow! You learn things about horseshoe crabs, but still, this animal gave you the creeps because of its long pointed tail that you think is full of venom. However, you were immediately reassured when you learned that this tail, called telson, is not actually dangerous or poisonous. All in all, this prehistoric animal does not seem to be dangerous, and to think that you are even amazed by it. Imagine you are in India, on the banks of the Ganges. You hope to see some of the animals that live in the water of this famous river up close, but against all odds, someone near you tells you that in the Ganges lives a species of crocodile called Ganges Gharial, which has existed since the Cretaceous period, that is to say for more than 140 million years, a prehistoric crocodile. you decide to follow the advice of this person and wait patiently for a gharial to emerge from the water to see what it looks like. What does not delay to come? You can finally see this big reptile whose long snout ends in a kind of bulb. Impressive! However, this appearance increases your adrenaline level, but fortunately you don't risk anything, because the gharial is far from you. And then you also learn that it tends to stay in the water rather than on land, because it feeds mainly on fish. Well, what a pleasant memory you will have of this animal. Many scientists who study animals do a lot of research, including on species that have become extinct, in order to better understand the reasons of their disappearance from the wild. But during the year 2020, these scientists got the surprise of their lives when they learned that a very special species they thought was lost since 1973 still existed. It is the elephant shrew, a rat-like mammal endemic to East Africa that owes its name to its long snout that resembles an elephant trunk. According to some sources, the existence of this animal dates back to the Upper Eocene, from 41.3 to 33.9 million years ago. Happy to be able to observe the small animal again, the scientists then made the trip to Africa, where they managed to come across a few specimens. But for this, they had to be patient, because the elephant shrew lived away from humans. Fortunately, the scientists have their own means to catch these small animals, but more importantly, after this important discovery, they became more motivated than ever to conduct in-depth studies on the elephant shrew. A few years ago, a fisherman by the name of David Guyot was quietly fishing off the southeast coast of Australia. He was hoping to catch some big, beautiful fish, but instead, he ended up catching this huge, very oddly shaped fish. Without hesitation, the man brought the fish back to his boat, after which he certainly showed it to specialists to get an answer to his many questions. He ended up discovering that he had just caught a lizard shark, learning that this deep-sea fish belongs to a prehistoric family whose lineage goes back 95 million years. Certainly, our friend was happy with his find. On the other hand, catching this scary lizard shark with its 300 teeth in its mouth was a shock for David Guyot. But he was probably told that he would not have risked anything, because anyway, the lizard shark is not dangerous for humans. At least, he must have been proud to have gotten his hands on a prehistoric shark. You have just discovered some of the oldest animal species that still exist today. Which ones fascinated you the most? Leave us your answers and impressions in the comments. And as always, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this video.